access.
It's technically still a council.
Where's he at?
In Argentina.
Jesus. That's gotta be their life, isn't
Yeah,
it?
right, yeah, yeah.
Why do you think about it? Yeah, you can make some money, so you have no kids, no
Yeah.
dealership, no nothing.
You know, there's like a whole economic development theory about like attracting a way that bodies to attract they have disposable income.
Yes.
They are more like inclined to like go to small retail,
Yeah.
support small businesses. Like there's a whole bit.
Oh, yeah. This Jenny is fucking she lives in
So these might be items. All right, why don't you guys come on up? We don't need a, welcome back. We don't need a quorum, so we can get going
Sounds good.
right at, so just some housekeeping. We're having some technology
I did
issues.
hear about this.
So yeah, I would still turn this on so that people in the room can hear you, but the live feed is going to require the boom mics.
Okay.
And those mics are live, they're hot mics, so they never turn on. So even if you whisper into each other to say bad things about us, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, just lean in. You might as well just
Yeah.
lean into it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So,
We would never do that.
Does anyone sign up for public comment? Okay. So, all right, the clock has hit 10. I'll go ahead and call this meeting Transportation Mobility to order. Could you please call the roll?
Slide.
Present?
Present.
Nailed it. All right, so there is no legislation today. We have a hearing or a presentation from Bike Cleveland on the bike and pedestrian crash report. I will note if the clerk could please mark excused absences for Councilman McCormick and Councilwoman Santana, who are both traveling and reached out to me. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and we are here to be briefed by you. So
Great.
go for it. Please introduce yourselves, and then
Yes.
so we have the presentation all queued up.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jenna Thomas. I'm the Advocacy Director at Bike Cleveland.
And I'm Angela Trevisano with June Data, and I helped Bike Cleveland compile a lot of this data and look through it together.
All right.
Yeah, so first we wanted to just start and make you all aware of who is really deserving of thanks and recognition in a lot of this work. This was not just us operating on our own. There are so many different partners at all different levels, particularly within local government here. And first, a lot of this report and a lot of this analysis couldn't have even begun or taken place without the public records team in the Department of Law and in the Division of Police. So much of this work involves pulling a lot of this original information that's generated by the Division of Police, particularly incidents reports, which you may be very familiar with if you've ever wanted to know about a particular incident that happened in your ward or anywhere else in the city. We also do a lot of pulling of surveillance video from Real-Time Crime Center. So the flashing blue camera lights at many of our major intersections. Oftentimes there's also a lot of collisions that take place at those intersections. So because they are public records, we do request those because they do often shine a lot of light on that. So public records team, they look through some sometimes nasty video of crashes with us. I just so very much want to acknowledge their work and time in helping make this study possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and also a big shout out to Urban AI for helping make all this data public. I think Cleveland is especially unique in how much it makes available to its residents, so we appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to the city's mobility team, which I know are working really hard on addressing some of these issues, and also thank you guys for having us here. And your staff was so great with helping us get this set up, so.
And I did want to mention to all of the first responders, especially the dispatchers who are taking these 911 calls, we learn a lot about their work and how challenging and chaotic it is for the dispatchers to figure out what's going on with just a phone call, but also fire, police, EMS. And also all the bystanders, whether it's doctors just trying to get a drink and then seeing a crash and performing CPR. There are real people being real heroes. It's Cleveland Water blocking off, rolling up on a crash and using their truck and vehicles and cones as if it was a sinkhole. there's a lot of heroes every day. We'll kind of mention a couple of them, I think, and some of the stuff we're going to go through, but they also need a huge shout out for the really challenging work they do.
Well, thank you for giving them their acknowledgement.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about Bike Cleveland. I think you're all familiar with us, but our work falls into three major buckets. We do advocacy, working with cities to make sure that their infrastructure projects are including safety measures and multimodal infrastructure as well, and policies. We also provide educational programs, including youth camps. We have an adult education class tonight on commuting by bike for a week without driving. And we also, love bringing people together for community rides and social events. But today, we're here to talk about one specific part of our work, which is our annual Bicyclist and Pedestrian Crash Report. This is the second time we've published a crash report, which you should all have in front of you, and I encourage you to take a look at. And we're going to be talking a lot more about this. This is what we're digging into today. So before we even begin, and we're going to talk about this more and revisit this, but I kind of wanted to start by underscoring the work that council can do to help us address the issues that we're going to lay out today. So we're going to come back to this slide, but just acknowledging that there's work to be done around accessing the public records. Of course, you all know how street safety is a major issue that I'm sure you all hear about a lot. So we're gonna come back to this.
I'm just going to go through really quickly how this report was put together, how we put together these pieces. And it kind of starts at a very high level. The first thing, the mission of a transportation department, or anyone focused on a transportation system, needs to be the people get there safe. It's got to be kind of the highest level, get there safe. If people are not getting to where they want to go safe, we all need to know, because from the city side, it could be someone just making a quick design decision to change something to make it safer, to make that crosswalk just a little bit longer for that person who isn't as fast as they used to be. So, and the second thing also that a transportation department or a transportation committee can do is think about how they can lighten the load for first responders. If you look at all the calls for service for police, fire, and EMS, a huge amount is related to traffic collisions. Now, whether it's two cars colliding with each other, or whether it has to do with someone outside of a car, police, fire, EMS resources are really being tied up with these. So there are things that we can do at the front end in design when we're building these streets to reduce the load so that we can do more with their capacity. So towards that goal, and particularly as it relates to people moving outside of cars, they don't have a car, they're on a bus, or they park their car and they're walking to the storefront where they're trying to go. They're on the sidewalks. If there's a crash, we want to know what happened. So the first thing we do is, and there's an example right here, is we pull this incident report. Anytime someone calls 911 or if a law enforcement officer sees something happen, this goes into the city's CAD system, computer-aided dispatch. This goes to dispatch. This goes to all the law enforcement so that they can keep track of the officers and what's happening and keep track of response times. So this particular one has a kind of a color police logo here. You see the location. This one happened at East 131st and Miles. And on the following pages, these are the notes that the emergency dispatchers are typing into their system. And these are getting relayed instantly to patrol cars, to other people within the division of police, so that when an officer arrives at a particular location, they are as fully informed as they possibly can be to the situation on the ground and what they're rolling up to. So a dispatcher will often ask, what happened? Can you describe what happened? Describe the car, describe the people. Do they need EMS? Is there a fire? Is the car on fire? Was there a license plate? Did you see something that can help us follow up on this? So we request all of these whenever there's anything labeled as pedestrian struck, this type of incident type. The next thing that we do, if any of you have been in a crash or are in the crash in the future, hopefully none of you are, in the state of Ohio, there's something called an OH1, and that's your official crash report. And it looks like this. It includes all the information that's really important for your insurance, if you need to do any sort of legal follow-up, but it includes things like where did the crash happen, when did it happen, who was the responding officer that's making this report. There's often a little illustration diagram where the responding officer does the best that they can to visually show how a collision happened, and they'll write a little description here. So this is the cover sheet example. We always pull this because this is the official record. If you're doing, like I said, insurance, you hire an attorney, they're going to want to see this. This is an official police record. The other thing that I mentioned was the real-time crime center video camera. Those surveillance cameras are often attached to poles. I'm sure you know where they all are in your neighborhood, but they're the flashing blue light. So when an officer comes on scene to any sort of incident, they can take a quick look around. If they see a blue light camera near where something happens, they can often radio in the dispatch and be like, hey, can someone in the real-time crime center rewind? Can you give me anything to work with? Can we find something? Can you figure out what happened? It's an important piece of evidence because it's video. You can see immediately what happened. We have a great kind of sort of shocking example where that video was really important in helping people who were involved in crashes. So that's kind of how we made that report. With all that data, we then look through and make sure all the documents are consistent with each other, that they match, that the officer wasn't missing a piece of information, because sometimes small pieces of information are really critical for people who are involved in a crash.
So through this report, as Angela was talking about, we match these OH1s with those 911 calls to see when someone calls 911 and says, hey, I was struck, or I just saw someone who was struck, matching that to the official report. And what we found was that less than 50% of those 911 calls are actually receiving official state reports. And this is very important because one, victims rely on OH1s, those official documents, to take legal action, file insurance claims. Decision makers use those documents to decide how our streets are designed and to determine safety priorities. And funders like ODOT, MPOs, NOACA, they rely on OH1s to identify their safety priorities and their funding priorities. And so, again, this disparity is it's pretty shocking, and our volunteers really dug into the data and they verified these reports. They took out duplications and anything that was wrongly coded, so that we feel that these numbers are very accurate. And so, part of what we've come out of this report with is trying to figure out how can we make sure that more of these 911 calls and incidents actually receive an official state report. And so with all of this data, and I know that you've seen the safety data over and over again, but what is different about this is that it incorporates those 911 calls. And so historically, the data that we used to form our Vision Zero plan, that all relied on OH1 data. This counts everything, including any incident that was called in to 911. And so you'll find a breakdown in the report of by ward, and I also want to underscore that this is just bicyclists and pedestrians only. If that map included car crashes, it would be entirely blue. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of those happening. So this is just people hit outside of a car. We break it down by adults biking and walking, wheelchair users, scooters, juveniles. And so this is how our report is kind of unique. I definitely want you all to see this report as a resource for you all. All of the ward breakdowns in the report include safety recommendations based on the data. And yeah, I think it's a tool that you all can use as you're exploring speed tables in your ward, or other types of traffic calming, or upgrading bike lanes, things like that.
We want to show you an example. One of the big things with this report is we try to capture the stories of people. A lot of times you're handed spreadsheets, or you're handed a map, or you're handed data, and you're just expected to know what it means or what to do with it. And a really important thing for us was these are real people. These are real families. These are parents and children. These are people trying to get around the city in wheelchairs, scooters. They're just trying to get there. They're trying to get there safely. This is an example of where this very unique work came together to completely influence and change the outcome of what happened. So I'm just going to do a little storytelling here. In this, do we have the next slide? Let's go to that first. So this is an OH1 on the screen here. This is showing a pickup truck striking a pedestrian on Lakeside Avenue. It's really close. We know it's a 6-lane road right in front of us. We see what the officers drawn here. And in the narrative, they basically say that this pedestrian was not using the crosswalk and that this truck appears to have just been driving straight. And if you look in the upper right corner where it says unit in error, often a responding officer will note with either a 1 or a 2, which corresponds to the different parties, who is at fault, who is in error, who should be held accountable, liable for any damage, etc. So you'll see here the officer marked the pedestrian at fault here. If we go back, this is a screenshot from a video that we requested through a public records request. Huge shout out to the Division of Police and the public records section for finding this particular camera. This isn't even one of those blue light cameras. You have a surveillance camera on the corner of City Hall on the roof. You see the scaffolding here. But this really caught a great shot of this pedestrian using the crosswalk first. And you'll see that that truck was not actually driving straight, but it was making a left turn out of that alley right next to the public auditorium there. We aren't going to show you the video because it shows a person getting their leg broken. But as I mentioned before, we pull all of this documentation. And when we received the video from the city, and it didn't match, so we reached out to this person who broke their leg. And what we also learned is that the truck actually made an illegal left turn. There is a no left turn sign posted there. Because and the person was using the sidewalk, so we shared this information with the person affected. We shared it with the city. The city did update its report, did correct it, but it was also interesting, and I don't blame the officers really here because it's not yet like SOP, like standard operating procedure to immediately get responding officers the video. When they were on scene, they also had 2 witnesses say that the pedestrian was running, which they weren't, and that they were running outside of the crosswalk, and that the truck driver did nothing wrong. So it's also a really odd example of, I forget what the actual term is, but when a witness doesn't clearly remember accurately what happened. But it just emphasizes so much how important the surveillance video is. So if you're ever looking for an example of do these surveillance cameras make a difference, they can make a difference in this particular context. I can see that. And this person went from potentially having, when he got hit, he kind of got hit in his body, went forward and made a huge dent in this person's hood, then broke his leg. He flew out of the crosswalk, so I suspect maybe some witnesses thought that was him running, but he was actually been flying from impact. So it went from everyone saying, oh, this pedestrian is going to pay for the damage on your truck, to instead, with this video, the insurance, as far as I'm aware, the insurance company for the truck immediately settled and paid the full payout for this person just trying to go about their day in a crosswalk in front of City Hall. So that, I think, is one example. And this is a really vivid example. Again, props to the city for producing all of this video. I don't know of any other cities really going this deep and letting us go this deep. We're very happy that Ohio is still a pretty transparent state when it comes to all this records and video. But this is an example. There are instances of this happening across the city. Odds are very high that this is happening in your wards. We have many examples of this. We have many examples of where video can be really important in figuring out what the truth of a collision is. But it also helps us, I think, in other ways. But I'm going to turn it back over to Jenna so that we can kind of wrap up. this part and be ready for your questions and talk more.
Yeah. So I wanted to end on a few notes of things that we'd love to work with council on. So first off, this work is easier when the city replies quickly with public records. The city deletes its surveillance footage after 30 days, and we need it to be held longer to make a lot of these requests and to make sure that everything is accurate. Frequently, we're waiting to get the dispatch notes and the OH1s, and we need those to be able to request video, and so sometimes we miss that 30-day period. We want you to continue supporting street safety and mobility projects in your ward. As you know, we just went through Cleveland Moves, which is a very exciting plan to improve mobility and safety across the city, and I know a lot of projects are going to be coming down the pipeline in your wards, and so, you know, recognizing how important those projects are to changing the way our streets work, improving the safety. We're hoping that you all continue to support those projects, and using the crash report to identify local priorities, and we'd love to see you all continue to fund traffic calming in your ward. I know that the speed table program has been great. We're hoping to expand it. And we are also hoping to expand the transportation team to include more implementation staff. I'll be talking with everyone more about this when the budget comes up, but our city, I know that I'm sure you've heard this before, but we are really limited by staff capacity, and we are really not on par with our peer cities in terms of how many traffic engineers, for example, that we have. Cincinnati has actually created a public works crew to solely focus on installing speed tables and other traffic calming projects across the city. As you know, right now, that time is split with resurfacing, and so being able to carve out a crew that can focus just on improving safety on our streets would be really a game changer for accelerating all this work. And that's it.
And then a couple kind of
Yeah.
pieces too. Jenna mentioned funding and projects. Like, put another way, just improving the organization of our staff capacity and resources. Like, everyone who works on our streets, as you know, they're in planning, they're in MOCAP, they're in public works and traffic engineering. So ensuring that there is really strong collaboration in it as well with your team and transportation committee and the other entities that exist. An interesting one too, I think that sometimes comes along across this table, is MOUs with other law enforcement agencies. So some, RTA PD, Case Western PD, University Circle PD. A lot of times they're the first responders to crashes in their kind of service areas. And what we're seeing is sometimes it's not consistent with who's taking the lead on ensuring that these OH1s are completed and sent over to the state, or that they're necessarily shared with the city and with the transportation team here in Cleveland. So we got to make sure that there's not I don't want to say harmful, but that there isn't a disconnect between our traffic engineers who build our streets and other law enforcement agencies who don't necessarily interact with our traffic engineering team here. We need to make sure that that data is complete across every law enforcement agency who's helping make things safe here in the city. You mentioned longer video retention periods. A lot of times the city comes back and says, sorry, we deleted the video, it was more than 30 days. Like, if we don't get the first report to know what happened, there's just not enough time to ask the city for that video. So if we extended it to 60 days, 90 days, I mean, if you're in a crash and you have the video of it, that really helps your case, especially if you did nothing wrong. So focusing on that, that's an easy, super simple change. But then just kind of coming back to what I said at the beginning was helping people get there safe, wherever they're trying to go. If it's for a walk, they're trying to get some exercise, if they're walking to school to pick up their kid, if they're walking to work, if they're walking around doing their job outside. And then just the importance of how this all ties into transportation and safety. As I said earlier, so much public safety capacity is going towards cleanup of traffic crashes. And it doesn't need to be that way. Not every city's like that. So if we want to instantly really expand the capacity of available first response, we can do that by preventing a lot upstream of the farm. So to just kind of highlight and re-summarize why we think this work is really fruitful and could be really productive, and it almost feels like free money sometimes. Like if we can stop so much of this damage from occurring, that frees up dollars to redeploy in other really important issues, whether it's in your neighborhoods or citywide. We're really interested to know what kind of feedback and questions you have. This is the second year that we've done this report, and we continue year after year to try to figure out ways to make it as helpful as possible for the challenging work that you all need to do. So that's the conclusion of what we have for you, and we're really excited to hear.
Thank you again. I do have a couple questions for you guys, and then I know Councilman Casey has a question. If anyone else does, we can transition over to that. Before I dive in, though, I just, the curiosity is killing me. When you submit records to the administration, your public records request, could you speak to the turnaround that you're receiving on that? What's the time frame in which you actually receive and have the request honored?
That's a really great question, and we're continuing to. This all started out with me just being curious, where are these kinds of crashes occurring? And this was several years ago, and over time, it's almost like we're becoming more professional in how we're doing this and tracking all these things, and that is something that we're really interested in tracking. Okay, so we always start first with this. This is really easy for the police department to send out to us, and it's arranged. I've sometimes received this the same day. I think it depends whether this is like the first thing they've come to in the morning. Sometimes it's a couple months. I think on average, turnaround time is within a couple weeks, which is good for this. And they can give us this quickly because it really doesn't require any redaction or in-depth review by law department. Generally, what's always redacted is the 911 phone number and the person's name. State law requires that be redacted since it's in an emergency dispatch system. Video takes longer, generally.
Okay.
Maybe 3, 4, up to weeks to a couple months. It kind of depends. And sometimes it depends on how serious the incident is and whether there's also an ongoing criminal investigation of it. Sometimes if it's a hit skip, which we've learned is a shocking, really shocking number. It really disappoints us to see how many hit skips there are, but that's a criminal investigation, so sometimes there's evidence that I think people investigating that want to make sure they can look in first and control that a little bit better. That's my hunch.
Okay. And sort of secondary to that question is, how are you, if an incident, we're sitting in this meeting right now, there's a crash somewhere in Cleveland, how do you get notified that occurred to even make the request?
That's a great question. We don't have a screenshot of it, but the Urban AI, if you go to data.clevelandohio.gov, the police calls for service is an entire data set that you can go to today, and you can sort and filter by any sort of incident. So if it's a disturbance or a theft that's reported or a break-in, you can go in and filter through the data and find all of those, and you can filter it by just your ward or just a particular neighborhood, and you can get it on a map or a spreadsheet. But that's generally updated every 24 hours, generally. Sometimes there's a couple days delay, but generally every 24 hours, 9 a.m., we pull up that list and we look for anything new that is relevant to the work that we're studying, and we get the incident number, which is this 12-digit number here at the top, and we make that request.
Thank you. It's a bit beyond the point point of this presentation, but just bluntly, at this point, it seems you all are receiving more information about public safety than this body is. We used to receive much more, and it's a bit frustrating that it seems that the administration has a protocol that they have not shared, I think, with council to help us understand how we can be tied into various things in our community. So this is very grateful. Thank you. I'll be speaking with Councilman Pawlicek about this because I think that this is something that needs to be operationalized. You're correct, there is state law that speaks to the need to protect the identity of victims. Biased opinion, the administration closed the tap instead of finding a way to adhere to the law while also being transparent. But glad that you're having success with transparency. But more specifically to the point, however, one thing that I noticed just flipping through, and correct me if it's a false or an incorrect assumption, in past reports, when we've looked at heat maps, especially of incidents around town, there's been areas that are much hotter than others, and I recall a lot of, especially the southeast side wards, appearing hotter on those maps. But if you look at the numbers here of total incidents, it seems that there's, in some cases, fewer than other parts of town. So there almost seems to be a disconnect between what those heat maps would have shown and what's being shown in the report. And I'm wondering if that comes down to the way we are tracking the 911 calls, or whether it's the OH1 reports. And is there some sort of, are we confident that, or is there a situation in which we might not be having issues be reported and that we're not effectively seeing the disparities that we know of in the data?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, so I would say I know that historically downtown has always been the highest hotspot for bicyclists and pedestrian crashes. I don't know all of the data specifically, but I do believe that especially car crashes and incidents of speeding are especially common in the southeast side.
Okay.
But I think when you kind of look at bicyclists and pedestrians specifically, the high pedestrian zones like downtown, Ohio City, do have higher rates. I will say too that this is just like a one-year snapshot. Like I recall, I do know that, for example, Ward 14 had a particularly high number in 2024, and that Ward 11 had a particularly high number of kids hit in 2023. And so I think this is just a snapshot, and then looking at 5 years together could kind of give you a better picture of where those hotspots are.
Okay, yeah, and perhaps that's the nuance, that one is showing crashes and one is showing
Yes.
pedestrian-involved crashes. I ask just because, and my next question is sort of based on your analysis, could you kind of speak at a high level to what the city's plans have been for the built environment and how you would maybe recommend altering what some of our plans have been or doubling down in certain areas? Because as you've noted, dollars are limited in all senses, and we want to make sure that we can be maximizing the impact where we can and when we can as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think we do have some fantastic plans out there right now, looking at Cleveland Moves, figuring out what the network is going to look like for separated bike infrastructure. And I think Vision Zero also outlines some great work to be done to just improve safety overall. But both of those plans rely on OH1 data alone. And so, I mean, what you've said to funding, sometimes safety funding is really dependent on, who has the most crashes. And so when we find out that there's actually double the number of people getting hit in Cleveland in 1 year than state reports would show, you wonder, could this make us more competitive for funding if we could solve this data issue? But I do think, we are huge proponents of street safety. I know it's one of the top concerns that you all hear, and we do hope that this can be reflected in the next year's budget, investing more in traffic calming and staff capacity to make those safety improvements.
Okay. And my final question is, could you just speak on the ground to that disparity between the incidents and the OH1 reports? What do we need to be doing as a city? What do people need to know if they're involved in a crash to make sure that there is that OH1 report submitted? Where's that breakdown? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll maybe go ahead and take that one and flip back to this, because this is a slide about your question. There are a large number of people calling 911 saying that someone hit me with their car. I saw someone hit another person with their car. I saw something happen. So that's happened over 600 times. But for a number of reasons that I'm going to jump into, less than half are actually getting the paper report that a person needs if they have hospital bills, or even the piece of paper that the city needs to go out for funding. So a couple of the reasons that we've seen, and we see it in these reports, and in one of the reports that I gave, it might show that in there. A lot of times, a person who is involved in any sort of incident where law enforcement shows up is like, I don't want to make a report. That's like quite common, and I think what happens, again, I'm not like a law enforcement officer, but this is just me, I think, making the most logical read of it. People say they don't want to make a report. Oftentimes that's because they just don't want to get involved in the legal system. That's generally the big one. But there's a really important distinction between a criminal report, trying to get someone charged with a crime, and this traffic crash report. When I think a first responder hears that a person doesn't want to report, a lot of times what that turns into is we're also not going to do a traffic crash report. And I think that a good practice would be to separate those. I think we can avoid making a criminal report, but still make sure we have the necessary information in a traffic crash report so that the next person who's crossing that street doesn't have to go through the same thing that this person is going through. A lot of times, in 99% of these crashes, there's no intentionality. Like no one, you never mean to hit someone. You never mean to get into a car crash. It's generally always unintentional. So it's not like we're preventing something by not making a crash report. We're not really fixing anything by not making a crash report. It's so important to make these crash reports. A new one that's coming up is when someone is injured, they are concerned that if they make a report, or even if they receive EMS treatment, that they're going to get billed for an ambulance ride to the hospital. That's another one. Another one that we see oftentimes, and these happen a lot of times at night or where a crash happens near where someone lives. If they can walk home, if they can limp home, they're going home. Especially if they're in a place where they don't feel comfortable, they don't want to stick around for 10, 15, 20 minutes waiting, especially when they don't know the person who's in this car. They don't know why this person hit them with their car. They may have been knocked to the ground. They could have hit their head on the ground. They may just want to leave what could be a dangerous situation. I think that happens a lot too.
Yes.
And I think you would see that particularly where there's places where there's not a lot of people around. So those are definitely some big buckets that we see time and again. And kind of the last one, which I think this one is an easy fix, is if they go home and they call 911 maybe a couple hours later and say like, hey, I thought I was okay, but no, my leg really hurts. I think I messed up or something. Generally the police, it seems, are requesting people to come to a district station. And that makes sense, like there's limited resources, you can't be going out to everyone's house maybe. Maybe that's an explanation. But if there was some way where we could remove that barrier, having someone figure out where is the district station? How do I get to this district station? What's going to happen to me when I go to this district station? When really a lot of it could be done via phone call or via like an internet forum. I think that's another big one that would help us make these numbers match more. That would help our traffic engineers understand more clearly and more completely what's happening in these streets that we need to be safely designing. And it would also help us get more money. Because right now, when we're going to funders such as the state, such as the federal government, we're saying we have 270 crashes. But we have all the paperwork and we have all the video that shows that that number is higher. And maybe we're more in need of some critical funding that will help us and help you allocate those dollars to where they need to go to make the biggest impact for your constituents.
Yeah, if I might add just a couple other examples. The Miles and East 131st incident report in front of you, you'll see that pedestrian was struck and injured and was taken to the hospital. They actually had the name and the license plate of the car that was involved. But for some reason, no OH1 came of this. To my knowledge, no investigation came from this. And officers arrived at the hospital. This happened around 8 p.m. On February 8th, and officers arrived at the hospital on around 6 a.m. on the 9th, and so he had been just discharged. And I think that gone on arrival is a frequent note in these incident reports because of the, people don't want to necessarily wait. I mean, I know people personally that when they're hit, they're dazed, they don't want to be in a situation where they're being confronted by the person that hit them. They want to get out of the situation. I've also definitely seen the issue of being asked to go to a district office. Frequently, I see it with like children. Someone comes home and says, hey, I was hit on the way to school. A parent calls in, and it's hard to make those reports at an office. So those are some examples.
I know Councilman Casey had a question. I don't know if anyone else does. But go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our presenters for all of this information. I'm going to refer to your presentation, the one where it's got fatal crashes 2021 to 24, and it's got the people hit reported.
Yes.
Right. All right. Of those 15 fatals, do you know how many of those were pedestrian, walking or bikes? Or is that just all walking?
I don't know the exact breakdown offhand, and I could let you know. I think it's mostly people walking. I think in 2020...
It's mostly pedestrians or people using wheelchairs.
Yeah, I think maybe 3 bicyclists were hit and killed last year.
Okay. And then adults biking being hit, do you guys ever break it down as to how or why they were hit? So what I want to ask is, right, and I've seen it all the time, right? I'm heading down Lorraine and I'm driving and I get stuck by every light, and the bicyclist riding down Lorraine next to me doesn't stop at a single light, right? And we end up at the destination at the same time because the bicyclist is not obeying the traffic laws, right? So do you guys ever do statistics on if there's an accident, right? I mean, we're quick to always blame, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, right? So we're always quickly to blame the vehicle, right, the car. But we also know that there's some irresponsible, and I'm not going on a bike ride with Bike Cleveland after this one either. There's some irresponsible bicyclists, right? They're just out, right? So how much of this statistic do you guys use to break down saying, look, the car's at fault or the bicyclist is at fault?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Councilman, through the chair, I think that we intend to track this more closely in our 2025 report and specifically look at those at-fault numbers. We only would have those for the OH1 reports. And as we showed with the Lakeside example, they're not always correct. And I totally recognize that, I see this on occasion as well. But I also think it still kind of speaks to the need for separate infrastructure. Think about Lorraine, for example, if I think some incidents on Lorraine, for example, and I'll say too that, east of Denison, that is one of the highest, fatal areas.
Going down the hill? Yeah.
And it's, where the bicyclist has to merge with traffic. I certainly see this as an issue, and of course we are also trying to do more education around this. For example, our Commuting 101 class this evening with Bike Cleveland. But we are hoping to track that more closely with the 2025
Right, and
report.
Mr. Chairman, representatives, the question is, do we as a council and as residents put a push on our police force, for more enforcement on bicyclists who are not, doing what they should be doing, right? When you see, and I get we need separate infrastructure and all that other stuff, but, or is there a push to educate bicyclists on obeying traffic laws as well? Because I'm assuming that a bicyclist should follow the same traffic laws as vehicles have to, right? So if there's a red light, you're supposed to stop at a red light, not look around real quick and blow through it. And I get the convenience of it all, and we've all done it, right? But if we're going to be garnering statistics, I'd really like to see how much of these accidents or crashes or whatever. So I think that would lead us to the idea of better infrastructure, right? Is it because the infrastructure that we have is so vehicle friendly and not bicycle friendly, right? But I want to make sure that, that we have all the facts, all the figures in regards to vehicle safety and really bicycle safety. So as you dive into it in 2025, is there anything I can do to help expedite that or help you get any of the information? I'd be more than happy to work with you and do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think it's a valid question, and just looking at this report that you gave us at 93rd and St. Clair, which it says the person was riding on the sidewalk, but entertain me for a second and pretend that there's a bike lane or something. I often see people riding against traffic in the bike lane, and I would say in this example, we have a driver coming up to St. Clair intending to go east, looking left for traffic, and not anticipating a bike to be coming from the other direction, be it on the sidewalk or in the wrong bike lane, essentially. So I do think that it would be able to help us understand how we need to educate people of why it's important to follow the laws as they're written, because that's understandable, maybe driver error of not expecting someone to be coming from the other direction, right?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask real quick, and again, we'll use Lorraine as an example because we both know Lorraine Avenue. When you're traveling on a bike, should you be traveling with the traffic if you're in the street or against the traffic?
To the councilman through the chair, with traffic is,
With traffic?
generally what we say, yes.
Okay.
I think I acknowledge sometimes that people are just more comfortable seeing oncoming traffic, and people,
I'd rather see what's coming than something coming up behind me.
I think it's just a feeling of safety that it provides people.
But we don't know if there's any law, do we? If you're supposed to ride against traffic or with the traffic, do you know?
I would guess that legally bicyclists should ride with traffic.
Okay.
And I think to your point too, I think riding on the sidewalk poses its own risks. But to that end, I think when cars plow right through crosswalks, pedestrians could be coming from any way. I see this very, very frequently. People are not stopping at stop signs fully. They're just looking one way and going right through. And I see this as a very common reason for a crash to happen.
Yeah. I'll just add to the council member through the chair too. There's certainly examples. We have video of the exact situation that you're describing, the exact same situation you describing. I think it's it's been a little bit since I've taken driver's ed or had to take the test, and I don't know how many questions there are for issues around bike. You don't take a bike riding test. Right? And in this country, we don't receive any sort of curriculum in school. So we're really kind of operating with what we've grown up with as a kid. And when you're a kid, you ride on the sidewalk. And if you're growing up maybe in a rural area, you walk along the side of the road opposing traffic, or else, it's going to be really challenging for fast cars coming behind you. So I think a lot of times humans just bring that learned experience from their younger years. And there's so many instances of everyone kind of using the roads in really creative and dumb ways. No doubt about it. I'm sure we could put together a really fun collage. I'm sure you all maybe have enough pictures on your camera rolls that we could make a dent in that. But as much as scooters are parking in the middle of sidewalks, as much as bicycles are rolling through a red light, like all vehicles are doing this. I see cars pull through crosswalks and to where a person in a wheelchair can't even cross, and then it blocks the vision. We've seen people make dumb decisions and make mistakes. And when you're a bicycle, a lot of times you're not coming through with a lot of weight or energy like a bicycle crash isn't going to cause a pileup, generally. I haven't seen it yet. So the risk of operating a large motor vehicle, I think intuitively, the risk of having something go wrong in a really serious way, it's a lot more serious, and there's a much greater responsibility when you're operating a motor vehicle. And they can go real fast, and they can really hurt multiple people all at once. So I get, and every time I see somebody do this, I'm like, oh, I really wish you weren't doing that. And there's a council member more here, even someone not wearing a helmet, like, I get it. The council member yelled at me several years ago for not wearing a helmet, and I thought about their advice, and I'm like, yeah, that is like good advice, but someone had to give me that advice. She gave me a ticket. I don't know if I would have received the advice the same. And maybe there are like really, really intelligent ways that we can help educate people. Maybe it's through signage.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not
Sure.
blaming bicyclists, right? It's more for the safety of the person who's,
Yeah.
blowing through lights and stuff like that, because, you're right. If a bike hits my car, right, it's only the bicyclist, but if I hit that bicyclist with my car, it may be something different, right? But I'm not blaming bike, don't get me wrong, I just want to know where the education part of it, because when you mentioned, look, there is no bicycle in driver ed. And I got a girl now going through driver's ed, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to ask her if any of these classes she's taken, do they talk about bicyclists on the road, right? So maybe that's your goal in life, right? Changing the driver ed course, right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
through the chair, I just wanted to acknowledge that my colleague Diana Hildebrand does a lot of work around education. She's in CMSD schools teaching kids how to ride on the street safely. But we're only so many people. But it is a very important mission for us as well.
Councilman Gray.
Thank you, Chief. My questions are on the same line of my colleagues here dealing with bike lanes. A lot of areas, in the city of Cleveland, they created bike lanes specifically for bikes to ride in the bike lane. But the bikes are in the street. They don't ride in the bike lanes. So that is a deterrent of cars trying to not to hit a bike when the bike is in front of them in the lane of the street instead of the bike lane. Chair to the team here. So when you're driving down the street, you see the bike is in the driver's lane, and you have the bike lane off to the side. That is conflicting for the driver. I would try to go around the bike because the bike doesn't, the biker is not biking as fast as the car would want to go down the street, but they won't move over into the bike lane. And even if you go around them and say, hey, get in the bike lane, and you're in the wrong lane, they look at you and just keep biking down the street. So, just in the same line of questioning of my colleagues, the city is creating all these bike lanes in all the neighborhoods for the bikers to be safer in the bike lanes. But they've gotten so used to driving in the street before the bike lanes have been implemented. So so I'm just saying that the bike lanes are not a waste of them, putting them in our neighborhoods now. But yes, I think that should be something that should be, reiterated to the bikers, dealing with the safety of the bikers. And this presentation, the bike lanes was created for that, but the bike lanes actually slowed the bikers down from them riding throughout the neighborhood. They in their own lane, they all together, doing their thing, which I think is a great thing. But that's what the bike lanes are for, and the bike lanes are not wide enough for a lot of the bikers who ride together. And just a bunch of them, it's a lot of them, and those bike lanes are like narrowed. And for them to ride behind each other or beside each other, it's not fast enough for them to bike down in that bike lane. So I'm not saying what can be considered, but what we reserve, what we observe in our community, per se. I live on the southeast side. We got bike lanes. We started getting bike lanes 3 years ago. And no one rides in the bike lane because they are so used to riding in the street, and how can that be put out in a way where bikers meet their own, not saying they, but bikers they like riding in the street instead of the bike lanes. Some do, but I know where I live, the majority of bikers are always in the driver's lane, and they are basically slowing the traffic down. We need that because of what we've been dealing with, per se, but it's still cause conflict with the driver and the biker, because the driver wants the biker to get out the way, and that's an argument in itself. And when they go around the biker, they may have a couple words, but the bikers need to move over into the bike lane and basically let the drivers drive in their own driving lane. That's a comment, nothing against the bikers per se, but I just agree with my colleagues of observing that now what's going on in our community. They're not used to being in the bike lane. They used to being in the street. So.
To the chair, to both council members, Casey and Gray, when I hear your comments, and I think kind of a higher level thing is you and everyone else expect people to be consistent and predictable. Like you don't want someone either in a car or outside of a car or walking on sidewalk to just surprise you or to just jump in front or create any sort of unpredictability, because that's a lot of times where mistakes happen and people get hurt. So that's how I'm understanding that, and maybe there's some agreement there. And for as far as education goes, I think, I don't know, when I grew up there was like Safety Town. We'd practice crossing the street. Some people don't even cross the street right, or there's things that make crossing the street fully legally with the signal, like it takes too long, you're waiting forever, there's no traffic, why can't I just cross? Why can't I just walk over, get to my car and drive away? So I think like consistency and thinking about how we handle that in the street, and I think signage could be a piece of that. Like if that's something we want to improve, then we could, in theory, the administration could observe, set up a camera, do traffic counts, observe how people are using the roadway and if it's being used as designed, because if it's not, maybe the bike lane needs to be made a little bit wider. When I'm riding with my wife. I a lot of times like to ride side by side with her, and sometimes the space is a little tight to constrained. And maybe that would encourage people to use the infrastructure that we spend a lot of money on. I think for sure, and I'm just really happy. I know we don't have the answers, and I know like some of the answers don't feel quite perfect, and maybe like you would have more questions too. But just as a final thought to the chairs, I'm happy that we're having this conversation, and we weren't quite sure what kind of questions would be ready for us, but I mean, I'm really pleased that this transportation committee like gets it, and they're like, you all are seeing things. You all are seeing where maybe tweaks can be made, things can be improved, people could be protected a little bit more. So I just encourage you to continue that if you so choose, because I think a lot of good can come out of it.
Sure.
One more question.
We can take public comment at the end.
So Bishop just brought to my attention, I didn't really, I got a tip of it, but we did have a fatality. It was on 126 and
Kinsman, yes.
Just was that last week?
It's about a month ago.
Did that report?
Yes.
You know, since you know, you go into that database and you do
Yes.
reports. Did that come through?
Yes.
Share to the team? So-
Yes, through the chair. We did receive that report, and we've even heard that there has been some legal action taken, and that someone has been charged with. Someone was going 90 down Kinsman, and a woman was biking, and when that speed is involved. So, her name was Yvonne Kemp, and when you go down Kinsman, there's now a white bike where she was hit so that we can all remember her and remember that our driving can really change someone's.
But chair to the team, but also recognizing that we don't have bike lanes going down.
Yes,
Kinsman.
yes.
The bike lanes are from 116 going south to east, starting from Buckeye, 116 Buckeye, and they go across down 116 by Woodhill Park.
Yes.
Half of that is the eastern, the other half is Woodhill Park. That is considered Woodhill Park going down Woodhill Park 116 on across. I'm not sure if you have bike lanes on your end of town.
Yeah, I do.
You do. But we don't have bike lanes at all on Kinsman Road, all the way down Kinsman from where it starts on 55th all the way down to 140th. There's no bike lanes at all. That's something that probably have not been surveyed by your department. Not saying it's a fault, but now maybe since so many people are biking in the community now, per se, that's why I said we have the bike lanes, and our residents are not, the bikers not using the bike lanes per se. If that's something that can be looked at, is adding bike lanes down Kinsman Road, but I know that has to be surveyed per se since this incident happened.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion, that's all.
I think one other thing to the council person through the chair is we've looked through thousands of reports over the years, and I've personally watched too many videos of people getting hurt, and I can very confidently tell you that this rarely happens. If there's a bike lane, like a life has generally been saved, like an injury has been prevented, because drivers are really good at respecting bike lanes, generally, and especially when they're protected physically. So that's a really great way to eliminate a lot of these crashes that you see throughout your wards. Is that, and especially if we can do it on a larger scale quickly, because like maybe where I live, there's more bike lanes, so I'm kind of safer right off the bat. But if I'm visiting someone in another neighborhood, they don't have the bike lanes. Me visiting them somewhere else don't have the bike. So it's there's some disconnections. You go one part of the city to the other, and it's kind of disconnected. So how can we better connect that? There's an example in here where, if we could have installed bike lanes, like this is kind of a clear example where maybe we could have helped someone survive
Yes.
So I want to like emphasize that, as council people, you're also like the champions for your wards. And this is a really, it feels like an easy opportunity, whether you're collaborating together as a body or collaborating with other, whether it's the administration or whether it's state and federal partners. Like this is a way that you can really make a difference. And if you can do anything to reduce the number of crash reports that I have to read or have to help people, that would be a tremendous service to me, and I would be very thankful. We would be very thankful, and all of us would be, I think, happy to know that our friends and family are getting to where they're going safely. We don't have to worry about them. So I just thank you all for all your questions and interest.
And before I kick it over to Councilman Bishop, Councilman Gray, something we've begun doing in West Park, kind of identifying that, for example, Warren Road, it would be very challenging to implement bike lanes. It's a very heavily used 4-lane road. We've started signing and are increasing the signage of kind of, we call it a greenway path through the neighborhood, that if you're trying to get from one side of the neighborhood to the other and you don't want to ride your bike on Warren Road, which I wouldn't recommend, here's a safe route through the neighborhood, a safer side street route through the neighborhood that might be a little longer in mileage, but gets you there. So instead of taking Kinsman, our Young, is that Dickens, and then you kind of get down to Luke, and you can still get down to Mount Pleasant, on the parallel streets without having to go down Kinsman, which does get a lot of heavy traffic, right? We've all been on Kinsman.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a good insight too. Thank you.
Councilman Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I noticed in this crash report that you have recommendations after every ward, and they kind of vary from ward to ward to ward. Do you have a citywide set of recommendations compiled here, just for the whole city?
Yes. I'm almost certain, is it? Yes. Yes. Right before the Ward 1,
Okay.
through the chair, there are some citywide recommendations. They largely pull from the Vision Zero action plan, but also some that we just found from our analysis.
Okay. All right. Mr. Chair, I just want to express my appreciation for Bike Cleveland and their efforts to make the city safer. I am a cyclist myself, so I do find it challenging in a lot of neighborhoods to actually ride safely. I feel safer in certain instances where, like say on Kinsman Road, sometimes I'm nervous to drive my car on Kinsman Road because the traffic is so fast and it's so aggressive that I would not want to ever bike down Kinsman. So, but I do appreciate the safety measures that the city is trying to implement for cyclists and their safety. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And Councilman Moore.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. First of all, I want to say, because I was late, I've also been doing the week without driving. I was not late because of the buses. I was late because I misread my schedule. I thought we were at 10:30. I was here at the building at 9 o'clock, and I apologize for missing the beginning. And I want to thank you for encouraging the advocacy for the week without driving, just to encourage different multimodal transits. I think I've shared this story before at committee, but I was in a bike accident when I was 18 and I wasn't wearing a helmet, and I was taken to the hospital, and it was like both me and the driver had made a mistake, but it could have been a lot worse than it was, which is part of why I am mean to people who don't wear helmets when they ride their bikes, because it's good for everyone's health, but I also know it's a barrier for some people to actually ride. I just want to thank you for the time and detailed follow-up from both the fatal crashes and the ward-based recommendations. This is really, really helpful to have it digested this way, and I know it will be useful for years to come. So I just wanted to make sure to give my thanks to the Bike Cleveland crew and everybody else involved with it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lou, why don't you go ahead up? And while you are closing a question and a thought, the question, there's no identifying information on these crash reports, the traffic crash reports. My question is, could an officer retroactively, if there's no witness or victim to do this, would they be able to use a camera footage to compile this? And are we doing that? Do you know?
Very often, we don't know the identities of people involved in a crash. For example, a hit and run. We oftentimes have no idea, but we know it's a vehicle. Sometimes we know what kind of vehicle, and we just mark that down. And we do that so that traffic engineers and planners know, like, something happened here. But yeah, for sure, even if we don't have the full, complete picture, I still think even with just a couple important pieces of information, we could always have an OH1 if our first responders can get in touch with the people who are calling these reports in.
Okay.
So,
And
yes.
my extension of that would be if people aren't calling it in, but for some reason we know what happens, can we use our real-time crime center information to essentially file the report in absentia? And would that be able,
Yes.
to boost our number?
think-
Let's explore that.
Yes.
I think we should be able to, if there's a camera present and if it's working, and if it's within 30 days, we haven't deleted the footage, then yes, that's a very intelligent thing to do.
So, and then the second thing for, I think, us to maybe put our heads together on, I know there are First District police officers who have been very eager to begin a Safety Town program in Cleveland. Obviously, it does not come at zero cost. You have to find a location, you have to build a little town, you have to do these things, but I think the dream would be almost an east side and west side locations. So if that's something that we can put our heads together on kind of pricing out what that would be, I think that it would be an offering, and I know that the community engagement officers would be eager to help in running it. So probably alongside others who would want to. So let's follow up on that.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Lou. One more question, Chair. You had said earlier about when a crash does happen, whether it's between a bike or a car, or do you guys just look at bike safety or two-car crashes?
We to the council person through the chair, if it's two cars, we don't dig in.
Okay.
There are so many of those crashes.
Right.
Maybe 95% of all the crashes. It would be thousands. 600 we can manage 600. If you're just walking to knock on a door, if you're on a scooter, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're outside of a car, we're looking out for you. We're digging in.
Okay, then the last question, and you stated that when that crash happened, it's debris out. It cleans up the debris. It just stated a little while ago.
To the council member, through the chair, I see a lot of debris always left around. I think a lot of people think that it's the city's responsibility to clean up streets and debris, especially if it's hazardous debris. But I mean, you just made me think of another example of where that's costing the city money and staff. I'm sure there's other things to clean up. So if we can prevent those crashes, just prevent those cleanups. But great question.
And thank you, Councilwoman Gray. And it's a good reminder that because this is only, to go back to using Kinsman as an example, because this is only vehicle and non-vehicle crashes, corridors like Kinsman, where I suspect there are a lot of vehicle crashes, are maybe underrepresented because people are intentionally avoiding it when they're on their bike and things like that. So there's two ways to look at the macro issue of traffic safety across Cleveland. With that, we'll turn it over to Lou. I was going to say someone turn around the boom mic, but we already got it. You're the expert. So go ahead. We'll say 2 minutes, and thank you for coming forward.
All right, thank you for accepting me to make a comments. My comments is to respond all the questions from the council members. Myself and all of you and all the people right now watching the video, we are all pedestrian first. You still have to walk to your cars. Nobody can park the car right in front of the store or in front of your workplace. So everybody's safety started with a pedestrian safety. Crash report is really good because that helps all government entities and research entities to study lots of the details in order to improve everybody's safety. Myself, I can only be an honorary member of Bike Cleveland because I'm too short to ride an adult bike. Myself, I have been a current community advisory committee member at GCRTA as a community member. Not getting paid, not getting, rewarded in any way. And I also am a member of Clevelanders for Public Transit. So I understand all these issues are important, but please remember, the reason today we have a lot of people riding bikes without understanding the traffic law, that's because it was okay. Traditionally, in the neighborhood, we did not have all those big vehicles with so many blind spots in their design on the street. We did not have that 50 years ago, 40 years ago, but now we are getting more and more. And this is the reason why we didn't really need a protected bike lanes. Now city decided to invest on that, which is good, safety. However, the problem is majority of the bike lanes are too narrow. No device to make that as protected lanes. So when the four-wheel vehicles or semi-truck, they have to avoid the potholes on our city roads. What would they do? They move around. But since the size of the vehicles, they have a blank spot. They may not see pedestrians and bicyclists. And this is the efforts we all have to make. This is the reason why we definitely need a crash report. No matter there's a prosecution, civil charges on injury or not, we need a crash report. That helps everybody on every level to look into safety issues. Please remember, everybody, every day our life started as a pedestrian. Pedestrians, what can we wear? Armors? Military armors to protect ourselves, just to walk from the buildings we are at right now to go across the street to our cars? I don't think so.
Thank you. And thank you. It's first of all, it's always good to see you, and really appreciative of your advocacy. And you're correct that in many ways we are having to design our own infrastructure in response to the things that are happening in society, the size of vehicles, erratic driving, that theoretically we wouldn't have to address, but we have to be responsive to. So thank you for your comment. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to Jack, who's hiding out in the back. And I will thank you for attending this meeting, Transportation Mobility, and looking forward to continuing to engage with each of you. So.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
too.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming. How long have you been back, Jack?